Hello and welcome to the Brodie Blueprint, the podcast designed to help college students and young professionals navigate their career paths. Each episode we sit down with industry experts from finance, business, sports, education and more to uncover their journeys, daily experiences and lessons they've learned along the way. Whether you're exploring career options, looking for networking advice, or just curious about different industries, this is the place for you. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hi everybody, welcome back to episode 6 of the Brodie Blueprint. Today I am joined by Chief Financial Officer at Quality Carriers, Christopher Garrand. Christopher, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and thank you for pronouncing my last name correctly. I appreciate that.
I try my best. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you and seeing what advice you might have.
Sure.
Okay, let's get right into it. So, looked into your education a little bit, Siena College, going back to University of Phoenix for your master's. Tell us a little bit about, life in college, what you're planning on doing, and what your career goals were at this time.
Yeah, so I in college I was a little misdirected. I went to college for computer science, and quickly realized that all of the languages that I was learning, the programming languages, were quickly going out of style. So Fortran, COBOL, Pascal, Assembler. People don't even use those languages anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think it was the math that actually flipped me, because when I got through linear algebra, differential equations and stuff, I started realizing this is not for me. I like math, but then there's liking math and liking math, right? So, so I went to a finance degree at that point in time I kept all my computer stuff as far as like a certificate or a minor, if you will. But finance was more my liking, not accounting. It's very, very different than finance and accounting. Yeah, and people say, "Oh, you're an accountant." No. I have accountants, but I'm not. I can't do that kind of stuff. That's like tax and all that kind of stuff. The funny thing was that when I went for my MBA, which at the time University of Phoenix was the only company doing online MBAs, and I was in Russia at the time, and I had no choice but to do it online. I went for global business management, but the most entertaining, the course that I loved the most was business law. I found that I absolutely loved business law. It was a little late to change career paths to become a lawyer at that point in time, but it's one of those things that I've always thought about and when I say law, I'm not talking about criminal law or things like that, but corporate law, contract law, stuff like that. So it was fascinating. So
it's great stuff. What was, at a time like this, were you into networking? Was this something that was stressed in colleges? Did you have connections in the field? No, not at all.
No, the internet wasn't even a thing back then. Back in the Civil War. No, I'm kidding. We're talking like 90s or so. So it wasn't a big deal. You had guidance counselors that tried to hook you up with, trade shows, and if you wanted to go to a specific trade show or whatnot. But my networking was pretty much non-existent. I moved out to California from Albany, New York, as soon as I graduated college, and this was back in '93, and there was it was the recession in California. The first year and a half, my job was working in bars as a bouncer and a plumber for the first morning. I couldn't find a finance job to save my life. So,
wow.
So networking was not a big thing back then. It is now, obviously, and there's numerous ways to do that. So there's an advantage to those folks that are coming out of college now, right? LinkedIn is phenomenal. I think that's where you and I met.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got this job through LinkedIn with a private equity group. So LinkedIn works, and I'm a firm believer in LinkedIn. I'm not so much a firm believer in all the other social media. I think that's more social, right? It's not professional.
Absolutely.
But LinkedIn definitely works, in my opinion. So
I agree. I think it's a great tool. I use it a lot. It's like you said, that's how I've connected with a lot of people for the podcast. So I think it's a great tool. So obviously you changed your studies to finance. This was something you enjoyed, the business law class as well later on. How did you get involved in the career you're in now without these connections? How did you get started?
So there are some organizations there's always professional organizations depending on what discipline you study. For finance, an example would be Financial Executives International, FEI. There's many chapters across the country. It's a nationwide organization of professionals in finance and accounting. Finding that professional group that strikes a chord with whatever discipline you're going for, what you want to do. The other thing that I highly encourage is if you're going to college and taking summers or whatnot, don't just work a job, get an internship. Work in a company, do something that you think you like to do, because you're going to find one of two things: you like it or you don't. And if you don't, you're going to want to switch things as soon as possible. If you like it, then you're going to go, okay, this is where I'm going to double down and find professional folks that are, you're also going to build contacts, network, etc. But that's internships. The value of internships, I cannot stress enough. When I went to school, we didn't even get paid for internships. You did things like, get the boss's laundry and stuff like that, wash his car, because they just had to, teach you corporate life. But there's a huge value in it. And we, at this organization here, folks regularly come in the office and say, hey, can I get an intern for IT? Can I get an intern for legal, whatever it is? I'm a big fan of that. It's a temporary cost to the company, maybe 60 days of employment, but it teaches that person a lot about the discipline that they're going for. And someone gets into finance and they go, oh, this is not what I thought it was. Surprise, right? So there's a lot of learnings in that regard. But internships, I cannot stress enough. And then that helps you build the network. But then once you figure out where you truly want to go, finding that professional network, such as in my case, FEI or other stuff like that. A lot of IT networks or legal networks or whatnot, or even alma maters that have, networks that they've put in those disciplines. So
I think it's quite familiar for people to think that internships are something they should look for maybe their junior, senior year. Do you think this is something that people could look for, freshman, sophomore years, and really try and get that idea earlier?
Absolutely. I would say as soon as you can possibly do it. Now, you may run into a little bit of pushback because folks are going to go, well, what experience do you have at all? And you have nothing, right? Oh, I worked at Walmart, I worked at McDonald's or something like that. But if you find the right company and the right boss, manager, et cetera, executive that does believe in that, a lot of them will pair with the colleges. They'll actually go to colleges and say, hey, look, if you've got some interns in this field, we're willing to accept it. But again, I go back to LinkedIn, because a lot of folks find that connection through LinkedIn. And just say, hey, look, I'm looking for 60-day internship. I'm willing to, you pay me minimum wage, whatever it is. I just want to come in and learn. I'll do all the, and you're not going to get the best jobs when you come in. I mean, we have interns in finance that come in and we give them spreadsheets to parse data and stuff like that. So the one thing you can learn though is it's never going to get worse than it is as an intern. So if you can go with it and like that work as an intern, then it's going to get better from there. So.
Absolutely. One thing we've stressed in the podcast first few episodes is how important it is to interview the company while you're being interviewed, whether it's for an internship or your first entry-level position. What advice would you have to maybe 19, 20-year-olds who don't have an internship yet and they've been looking for one and they're trying to find one to settle on? What would you suggest for them?
So that's an excellent question. And we could spend the entire podcast talking specifically about interview techniques and what to focus on. But when you're at the 19, 20-year-old level, you really need to look at this, even though you are interviewing the company, but your standards should be considerably lower. And there's lots of things that you would say, I don't want to put up with that. But you got to remember, this is a temporary thing. And you're going to, all the things that you would learn that you would not like, those are still learning lessons. And you're going to go, okay, I now know this is something I don't like. I definitely knew this going in. This I thought I didn't like, but now actually it's not that bad. And you're going to learn those things. But if you establish if you really have high standards going into the interview and saying, I can't work for this type of person or this type of, then you're gonna shut yourself out of a lot of doors that would be great to walk through, at least and remember, it's just a 60-day thing. Yeah. But it's that, and then you can start to use that as a building blocks for the next conversation you have in the following summer. Hey, I worked here you just say I worked there for the summer. You're not going to say you worked there for 60 days. You're going to say I worked there for the summer as an internship, but I already understand the corporate environment. I know HR. I know how finance works. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I've been there. All I need next is the next stepping stone, and people are much more willing to listen to you. So I would strongly advise, don't have such ridiculously high standards when you go into an interview, thinking that this is not when you go for a permanent job interview after you graduated, that's a different story, because now it's like a dating game. You're looking for someone you're going to pair off with for the foreseeable future, right? Yeah. And you got to consider benefits and what other opportunities are out there and all that kind of stuff. But for an internship, you're just looking to get your foot in the door. You're looking for the experience. Even bad experiences are wisdom, right? From all wisdom, from wisdom comes from memory, right? Aeschylus, Greek philosopher. There you go. So
Good. I think to add to that, you'd mentioned social media earlier. I think for my generation, we often see, the dream internship, the dream law internship, the dream accountantship, and it's plastered all over social media,
Sure.
and it's all we see. Do you think there's absolutely importance to an internship that's not as glamorous, not as high tech, maybe not as interesting overall, but like you said, you're getting the foot in the door, you're understanding the corporate environment. Is that potentially more beneficial in the long run?
I think it absolutely is. The problem, and again, we can talk forever about social media and what it does to us, but it basically,
Absolutely.
and it's not just with work, right? There's constant. We see all these images of people who are driving rich cars and they're living the rich lives and they're on fantastic exotic locations. And look, I'm not saying that you're not going to get there someday. You probably will, but it takes hard work. There's no I start working for a company and I'm instantly in the fast lane and I'm loving life. I mean, yeah, you could hit the lottery and find a perfect job that absolutely needs your skill set and it's wondrous, but the odds are not there, right? So again, lower your standards, understand that social media is designed to glamify everything.
Yeah.
And that includes the job opportunities. You're not going to get these companies that you might get a company that has all these benefits of, well, we have our cappuccino at 10 o'clock and then 3 o'clock, and we have a full buffet of vegan food. Okay, whatever. It's possible that you're going to get in Silicon Valley in some, Google-like company. But the vast preponderance of people like myself are going to work for companies that are just companies, and they're looking to turn a profit. And they're going to offer you the entry-level spot, which unfortunately comes with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. That's the way it is. And you're going to have to invest that portion. It's not going to be a glamorous thing that you're going to post on social media, but you're going to get a huge learning, not just from the professional side, but the interpersonal relationship side that young people have to do. I mean, I have a 17-year-old kid and his boy, and he's regularly, his challenge is to regularly interface with people. And I keep telling him, don't just post to the job. Don't send an email. Go in and say, hey, I sent an email last week. I'd like to follow up and have a conversation in person. Is there a manager I can talk to?
Absolutely.
Eye contact. That's the kind of stuff, unfortunately, for folks that are not good at it, that's the stuff that they have to focus on, the interpersonal skills. And it's a lost art at this point. So
I think interpersonal skills like that is something a lot of the guests have spoken about before. I sadly think it's kind of a soft skill that's been forgotten in our generation. I think obviously we talk through computers, we're talking on a video call just now. 20 years ago we'd be sat in person trying to film this somewhere else. What do you think how do you improve those personal skills? People that are uncomfortable in networking conversations, how do you get over that hump and start talking to business people?
It's funny because 2 hours ago I was having tea with my director of finance, and then she was saying to me that I can't. I keep having a hard time speaking in public. How do I get better at this? And I go, you get better at it at speaking in public. And so, I mean, interpersonal skills is the same thing. You're going to get better at it the more interpersonal relationships you have. If all of your relationships are on your phone and that's where you're dealing with everybody in black and white text, then you're not going to get better at interpersonal relations. You need to sit across the table from them, not look at your phone, have the conversation, listen to them. And when I say listen, I mean truly listen, not just listen to respond. Listen to what they're saying. Look at their body language. What are they saying? What is the meaning behind their words that's not just in their words? Learn what body language looks like when someone's confident, when someone's embarrassed, when someone's nervous. Pick up on those skills. Get good at that. If you get good at that and making people feel comfortable and becoming a part of it, they want to be a part of you, they want to be around you, you will rule over your peers. It's just the way it is. So you're absolutely correct. It is a soft skill. It is it's not one that's constantly talked about, and it's probably one of the most important that is out there.
I think that ties greatly into what you say about getting an internship early on. If you're an 18-year-old, 19-year-old freshman or sophomore in college and you've never been around this environment or these conversations, being in the door for 60 days in the summer could be massively changing for how you approach these conversations. So huge. I think you're absolutely right. Now, like you said, we could talk about networking and talk about internships for hours, but we'll try and move on to stay sort of on pace. I'd like to talk about some of the roles you've had. Just from reading, you've been in mainly managerial positions. What's it been like, your days in the life, your weeks in the life? What have your roles been like throughout your career?
Well, you've taken a look at my history. So I've been all over the world. I lived in Russia. I lived in the Middle East. Not the Middle East. Sorry, Caribbean, I did have a responsibility in the Middle East for a short amount of time. And also all over the United States. So California, Texas, Ohio, Atlanta, all different jobs, different places. So my office, and what I was doing at that point in time is I was jumping to these different places to learn, to explore what I was looking for, what was important to me. And I learned that what I really enjoy is entrepreneurial type positions. I don't like the whole, you're in a cube and you're pulling the lever and you're pressing the button every day and getting to the feed pellet, right? It's every single day, day in and day out. That's not my thing. I wanted to go into an environment where I didn't know what to expect from day in and day out. Working in Russia, in Moscow, Russia for a couple of years on a baby food business, right? Gerber baby food. Or Poland or the Caribbean in place. That was a very different world, right? So very laid back and having warehouses and all this kind of stuff. And getting into that stuff, you never knew what to expect. That's what I learned I like. And so then as I get higher up in the organization, I start looking at different jobs or recruiters call because of my experience. I start asking questions. What are those things that, what kind of an environment is it? Is it an environment where I'm the one making a lot of calls, or is it someone telling me to do something all the time? And I'm okay with that. Some people love that. I have a whole host of accountants that they would be horrible in a position where I just let them autonomously run. They need to be told which entry, what goes where, right? So everybody's personality is different, but you need to figure out what truly drives you. And I think that's what hopping around to different types of things like that does.
What stage of your career did you learn that you preferred sort of entrepreneurial roles?
When I was in Russia.
Really?
I had no idea. They sent me over there. So I was working for a company called Novartis Consumer Health, a very large pharmaceutical company. They had an over-the-counter drug division that also had an infant and baby group, Gerber. We all know Gerber.
Yeah.
They ended up selling that to Nestle. But before they sold that to Nestle, I went over to Russia and I was handling their baby food business in Russia. I was 32. They sent me over there and said, hey, what do you think you can do? I went over for a week, looked at the business, put a PowerPoint presentation, and they basically said, okay, great. When do you go? And I was like, what? Now, fortunately for me, I wasn't married, had no kids. I maybe had a sandwich in the refrigerator and a suitcase in the closet, right? So I could relocate very easily. But once I got over there, I had no idea what I was doing. And so the next critical skill or critical thinking skill aspect is that's the other soft skill, or hard skill, you can call it whatever you want, but that's the other thing that I think besides the interpersonal skills, critical thinking and the ability to problem solve is absolutely, just pivotal in your life. It changes your life in so many ways. And being forced in a situation where you have to figure stuff out. Nobody told me, hey, the Russian government wants to shut down your baby food business. Go figure it out. What do you do? I don't know. So you have to go figure this stuff out. So hiring experts, if I'm a big believer, if you don't have the wisdom, pay for the wisdom. Hire somebody who's an expert that can teach you, right? It doesn't matter if I'm fixing an air conditioner at my house. I have no idea how to do this. So I get a professional air conditioner guy to show me so I can learn. That's buying the wisdom. It's the same thing no matter where you do it. But then you learn how to problem solve. And again, it goes back to experience and memory, wisdom. You start to apply the ability of problem solving over here to this particular thing, and you go, hey, it worked. And so that's where the problem solving skills come from. So I think the answer to your question, though, I know you asked me kind of what time it was, and I told you how to build a watch. But the way I kind of look at this is I think Moscow, Russia did a lot of things to me, but it really taught me problem solving skills, and I really enjoyed that. And then I realized this is the kind of stuff I want to do.
And obviously that's probably been massively beneficial for your career since then, I'm guessing.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't want to do that. People don't want to relocate. They don't want to move. They don't want, especially to a country like Russia. People are like, what? If you're going to move, let me move to, I'll move to Italy. I'll go sit in the French Riviera. But if you say, hey, you want to go live in Russia or in some, or in China, these are difficult places to live. They're not like we see on television, or maybe they are in some cases when it comes to Russia. But there's challenges there that you would not expect. And when you go there and you realize you're walking around the streets and you're going, okay, this is very different than what I thought. And you have to grow. You can either run and go back home, or you can figure it out. And companies want people who can put that sweat in there and figure that stuff out and problem solve. They want that because it's not a lot of people who do want it. So they're willing to pay for it.
I can imagine. I don't want to keep talking. I won't spend the whole episode on differences in generations, but one thing that I want to ask is, skills like problem solving and skills like speaking to people are skills that, my parents had and used in business. Do you think there's a reason that this isn't something we're not necessarily taught, but it's not something that's stressed anymore?
Well, yeah. I mean, so when you want to research things, what do? You pull up
Google, probably.
ChatGPT or Google,
Yeah.
right? We
Yeah.
had to go to the library, and so we had to look at the Dewey. You had to go into the Dewey Decimal System and the cards, and you had to figure out where your book was, and you had to ask someone. By doing that, the effort that was required in going to learn something was extensive, and it required lots of personal investment. Now it's just you click. It's a great thing to be able to have whatever answer. You can spend a whole thing talking about whatever answer you're getting, whether it's right or wrong, but that's the point.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of investment in that, so it makes it easy. And because it's easy, you're not using those muscles that you would normally use to go out and have to learn something. And so when you get challenged for the first time and having to learn something that you can't just look up, and it's just few and far between, but there's a lot of answers that you can't just look up. You have to come up with a solution to a problem. You finally have to use those muscles, and it's no different than getting on the treadmill after not having run for a year and a half, 2 years. You're going to be like, wow, I can only run a mile. Well, guess what? You haven't used those muscles. It's the same thing. And so you have to develop those muscles, and critical problem solving skills are muscles that have to constantly be used.
Would you advise the young people in a world full of technology, when you're faced with a challenge, that it's more valuable to do it the old-fashioned way, enjoy the struggle and work hard and improve those skills, as opposed to the quick and easy way? Because I know I completely understand why it develops these skills, but like you said, it is so quick, it is so easy. Where is the balance between those two?
Well, so it's tough, Jack. I don't know that you can put it away. You can't unplug from it, right? It's everywhere. So instead, I think the best thing that you can do at this point in time to mitigate that atrophy of that muscle we were talking about is not just getting the answer, but understanding the answer, going into what truly makes that answer work. What is the science behind it? Learning all you can about that particular topic, not just taking the answer 2 + 2 is 4, but understanding what does that mean or why, and what happens if I change this variable, and what does that variable do to the equation. When you understand it fully, and you can use the tools like ChatGPT. I use ChatGPT. It's phenomenal in how it reasons with it, right? But you can't just ask for the question, the answer, and then move on. You have to take that answer and build it into the problem and understand a little bit deeper as to what's going on, so that you can explain that topic in front of a room. And Einstein used to say, if you can't explain, I think it was Einstein that used to say, if you can't explain a topic clearly enough, then you don't understand it, right? If you just go up in front of a board, like if I go before the board and I give them an answer, they're going to want to ask questions about it. If I pulled that answer from someplace and don't know it, how am I supposed to give them context? And then I don't clearly know it, right? So you're never going to be able to get away from the technology, but you can utilize the technology differently than just going to get the answer. And that'll help you learn, how did that answer come about? What makes it? That's the critical thinking muscle we were talking about.
Absolutely. No, I think that's great advice, and it's great advice, especially for young people who are just getting started. I will try and move us on, just because there's a lot of your to talk about. A lot of positions.
Don't feel, just go like this, and I'll stop talking.
Sure. So obviously you've been in a lot of different positions. We talked a lot of managerial positions. Obviously you figured out this entrepreneurial roles and behaviors, what you more enjoyed. Before then or after then, what's some struggles you've had in managerial positions, whether it's working with people or the things you've encountered? What's been difficult in your career?
Yeah, this is another conversation I had recently with my team. So the hardest thing about managing is not the projects, is not the the company itself. It's the people side of it. And the most difficult thing to deal with is, I mean, everybody likes to talk to people and say, hey, you got promoted, you got a bonus. We all love that, right? It's easy. Let me go tell them. So I'll go in there and tell them that he got a bonus. But when you have to critically challenge or provide criticism, you have to provide disciplinary action, or you have to get rid of somebody, or in some cases you have to lay somebody off because the company isn't performing. All of these things are much, much harder to deal with when it comes to people. And again, the only way you get good at it, and nobody likes it, but you can get good at it, and is to have to do it. I have a number of managers who have come to me and said, I didn't realize how hard management was until I had to discipline, or I had to get rid of an individual. Nobody likes to do that. And it's frequent that And even when I've had to downsize, I go home. I've been doing this for 40 years, and I go home and I don't sleep all weekend because I know I have to come in and I have to get rid of an individual, even if that individual deserved it, even if they did something that, is, or if they stole or whatever the case may be, something that's clear, black and white. But it's still hard to do. And as a result, one of the problems that we have with individuals is that we don't give them feedback all along. We tell them, because it's easier to not have confrontation, we tell them, oh, everything's fine, you're doing great, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you get them a bad review, or you have to let them go. And they're like, I thought I was doing great. And so this disconnect, because the manager would not confront when they needed to confront that issue. They wanted to put it off. You have to be regularly open with individuals. Nobody who works for me ever has to worry about what I think. I'm very open about it. But you give them multiple chances, and you can do that when you have conversations. So confrontational ability, or the ability to confront people, my wife will say this. She says, "You're so good. You must love confrontation." No, I don't love it. What I love is resolution. And resolution only comes from confrontation. That's it. Speaking of the wife, as she calls. Speak of the devil when she arrives. So I'm just joking if she ever hears this stuff. But confrontation is a skill that you have to learn. So
have you found that as a manager, this increased communication has actually maybe prevented some of those difficult conversations developing maybe weeks, months later?
Yes, it does, because if you and I get bad feedback, we're going to do our best to mitigate that feedback, especially if we're interested in keeping our job or whatever. It could even be a relationship, right? If your partner tells you that, hey, if they do it in the right way and they say, all of this stuff that's going on, I would really like you to be a little bit different. I realize that I'm probably part of the problem, so I'm going to do my best to change. You hear that conversation, you're like, okay, let's figure out how to work this out. If I don't say anything to you and I come to you and say, I can't take this anymore, we got to get divorced. You're like, what? Wow. Where did this come from? Right? I didn't have any feedback. I thought things were going great. How many times have people said, I thought it was going great, and then she broke up with me, or he broke up with me? So that is because of a lack of feedback. So confrontation can be done piecemeal and feedback in the form of feedback, or it can be done all at once when you have to deal with the problem when it gets too big to handle, right? So in my opinion, it's much easier to be open and honest and direct, going back to the interpersonal skills all along, especially as a manager of an organization, than it is to piecemeal it, than to do it all at once when it comes to a head, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure your team value that as well. It sounds, increased communication for anyone in any role, I think, is very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what is something you wish you knew that you know now when you started out in managerial positions?
Okay, well, that's so I would say one of my biggest problems was being very self-centric. Everything was about me, which is normal because we have an ego and a superego and all that, right? And an id, and all of these things in our head make the world about us. How is it going to affect me? How is it going to change my job? If I'm in a room and they're talking about changes in policy, the first place my mind went, and most of our minds goes, is, what does that mean to me? What does it mean to me, right? Yeah. So instead, and it's not possible to totally remove that. You're always going to think about yourself and the impact, but understand why the organization is doing things. See it strategically, not tactical. Understand the why a company is doing something, or the why someone is asking you to do something, and then take it 2 steps further and understand what you can do to go ahead of the curve, to provide additional insights, to move the company in that direction. Hey, I was doing this project, but because of this conversation, I know that maybe the goal might have changed. So I tweaked a couple of things, and the boss goes, wow, this guy's really, or this girl's really good at thinking ahead. You become an asset that becomes valuable. If I had thought more corporately, and you know what culture does this amazingly? The Japanese. They're phenomenal about this. Phenomenal about thinking from the company as the company first, then the individual. We in America, we think individual first, and it's not just America, it's the West, right? Yeah. So to the extent you can put it, yes, it's important what happens to you, and being egocentric is going to happen. But to the extent you can think of the larger picture, those are the things that I did not do early. Had I done them earlier, I believe that I would have been more successful earlier, and then until learning that later in life. So
okay. I'd like to touch on that, the idea of the individual versus the company. I think, and again, it all comes back to social media for this generation, but
Sure.
one thing we see a lot of is people say, take the extra holidays, take the paid time off, you're just a number to this company. How do we bring back this view that it's not necessarily you turn up, clock in, clock out, but you're trying to put the company first, you're trying to build this team bond, team spirit in the company. How do we get back to that and stop people from, feeling kind of just like a number within a company?
Yeah. So the easiest way is connection. It goes back to interpersonal skills.
Yeah.
So I will take a little bit of a side and just say, when it comes to holidays, PTO that you're owed, you should absolutely do it. Maintain that work-life balance. Keep that good sanity. Yeah. So that I'm not in any way saying ignore your time off and work like crazy. No. I've been there. I've done that. I know people have done that. Their lives have been miserable because of it. That's not what I'm saying. But from the interpersonal side of it, just because you get put in a cube to do a particular job, pull a lever, press a button, it doesn't stop you from walking around and understanding the downstream and upstream of what's going on in relation to what you do, right? Going to lunch and taking somebody from another department that you've never met before. Hey, I was curious. Could you tell me a little bit about how this, and they will start to talk to you, learn more about the business. Then you can start to contribute more. You can start to have conversations with your boss and say, hey, look, I got my work done and I was really interested in being part of this project. Would you mind if I just sit in and become a part of this project? Then when Jack's name goes on all these different projects, people start looking and go, what? Jack's everywhere. How does it, and then when promotions come up and they look at organizations to fill up different boxes on the chart, they go, well, what about Jack? He's on the top of everybody's mind, right? So you're going to get your name on the top of everybody's mind. The way you're going to do that is having those interpersonal relationships across departments, contributing, even if it's tiny little things, even if it's just advice across the board. So that's I think one of the biggest things you can do.
Absolutely. Do you think the way you say, it sounds very simple the way you laid it out there. Is this more of a point that the opportunity is going to be there at companies? If you go out and look to involve yourself, look to get involved in the company and understand why it's happening, then you probably will find a more enjoyable work life. You probably will find that you feel more valued, and you will find that you play a bigger role in the company.
I completely agree with your statement, 110%. I will say that it is a general statement, right? We hope that companies are like that, but there's always going to be dead end jobs that your boss might go, hey, I don't want you involved in that, or just focus, keep in your lane. You may have a problem with a boss, right? So not every manager is a good manager, and sometimes managers will keep you down, but don't use that as an excuse. If you say it's my boss, it's because they treat me then you're again being egocentric. It's all about you. You're not looking outside your bubble and saying, I might be wrong about this. I may have looked at this incorrectly. I may need to consider it differently. Give the company, the people, a chance. Then, if you've tried multiple times fairly, step back, get another person to tell you and give you fair advice on whether they believe you are truly putting forth an honest effort, or whether you're being very biased, right? But again, if you can do that, and you're always going to have exceptions to the rule. I think that's your plan. So.
Absolutely brilliant. No, I think that's great advice. We're going to move on to our final segment now, Christopher. It's a little bit different than usual. Our 10 quickfire questions have turned into your 3 top tips. So take us through them, whether it's what you did in college, whether it's what you've learned in your career. What's Christopher Garrand's 3 top tips?
So we're going to touch on the stuff that we talked about. So to the extent you can, go out, spend time with people you don't know, people you just met, people you've known forever, your grandparents who've had 100-year or 80 years of experience, whatever it is. Sit down with them and hear their stories. Ask them to tell you about things that they didn't tell you before. Ask them to tell you how they met. Talk to people on a bench somewhere. Just strike up a conversation. Get used to calling people or talking to people online and making them laugh, making them feel at ease. Even if it's a customer service agent or somebody you're scheduling your maintenance for your car, make them laugh, make them have a smile. Learn that skill and fine tune it. Get that. Once you have that, it's a tool in your toolbox you can pull out anytime you have a difficult relationship, anytime it's confrontational, whatever the case may be. But going into the second part of that, don't be afraid of that confrontation. Don't respond with aggression, anger, or violence, because you can diffuse things with confrontation very easily. You can simply just talk to people and go, hey, look, I understand you're really pissed off right now. I don't know that you want to be here, and I know I don't want to be here in this particular conversation. So how do we get through it? If you just say that to somebody, you're connecting with them on a level that makes them go, okay, this person's not looking for a fight, but they're willing to stand their ground. There's a difference there. And so you can work through confrontation and you start to learn that skill. And then you can have the harder conversations with people. You can say, hey, look, I didn't really like when you did this. You're still my buddy or my best friend. I love to go to the pub with you, but we got to work this out because this is toxic. It's not good for you. It's not good for me. We got to figure it out. People will ultimately value that conversation. They may not like it at first, but even people you let go in an organization or you had to lay off or fire, someday they're going to come back to you and go, thank you for having that conversation. You did it in a way that taught me a lesson, and I've applied that lesson later in life, and I've been successful because of it. So that, and then the last part, number 3, would be going back to the critical thinking again. Learn how to problem solve, and these are all interconnected. You will learn how, and it all comes back to experience. So that's what wisdom is. I saw this before. I recognize the pattern again. I'm going to apply the same technique once more and get the same result. Hopefully, I didn't get the same result. Well, what was different this time than the last time when it was successful? Oh, well, this changed. Next time I do it, I'm going to think. And that's another decision process. But it's all about thinking through problem solving and being critical analysis. These are the 3 things that if you guys, if the younger generation, I say you guys like that, but if the younger generation can, I tell my 17-year-old, if you can figure this stuff out, you will step into a corporate environment and you will have no choice but to succeed. So,
right. There you go. Christopher, thank you so much for imparting some wisdom on us today. I really think you've simplified some quite scary topics for some young people, so I really appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jack, for having me. I appreciate it.
Brilliant, guys. New episodes every Wednesday and Sunday. Brodie Blueprint on Instagram and TikTok, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks again. Well, that's all for today, folks. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and were also able to gain some valuable insight into a potential career. Please head over to Instagram and TikTok and follow us. That's the Brodie Blueprint. And also don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube as well. If you guys have any guests that you want to see on the podcast or any industries that you want to see guests appear from, please let us know. Until next time, guys. See you later.